The stagecoach hit a rut so deep that Josephine Kensington nearly flew from her seat, her gloved hands gripping the leather strap as her traveling case tumbled to the floor, spilling ribbons and letter paper across the dusty floorboards. September 1876 had brought her from Philadelphia to this God-forsaken wilderness, and every bone-jarring mile made her question the sanity of accepting her uncle's offer to help manage his general store in Victor, Colorado. Through the window, she watched the flat plains give way to rocky foothills, the landscape growing wilder with each passing hour, so different from the manicured parks and cobblestone streets she had known all her 22 years. The driver shouted something unintelligible, and the coach lurched to a sudden stop. Josephine pressed her face to the window, her heart hammering when she spotted 3 men on horseback blocking the road ahead. They wore dusty trail clothes and had their hats pulled low, and for a terrible moment she thought they were bandits. Then the door swung open, and instead of a gun barrel, she found herself staring at a pair of the most striking green eyes she had ever seen. "Afternoon, miss," the man said, touching the brim of his worn Stetson. "Sorry for the scare. Creek washed out the bridge about a mile ahead. You will need to take the northern route through Cripple Creek instead." His voice was rough-edged but polite, and Josephine found herself unable to look away from his sun-bronzed face, the strong jaw shadowed with several days of stubble, the small scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He was tall, lean in the way of men who spent their days working hard under an unforgiving sun, and when he shifted his weight, she noticed the easy grace of someone completely at home in his own skin. "How much longer will that take?" the driver called down. 3, maybe 4 hours extra," the green-eyed stranger replied. "But unless you want to swim your horses across, it is your only option." Josephine cleared her throat. "Is the road safe?" Those green eyes fixed on her again, and she saw something flicker in them, amusement perhaps, or maybe curiosity. "Safe as any road out here, miss. My brothers and I will ride ahead. Make sure you do not run into trouble." "That is very kind," she said, meaning it, though part of her bristled at needing an escort like some helpless child. He nodded once, sharp and efficient, then swung back into his saddle with fluid ease. As the coach lurched forward again, Josephine watched through the window as he and his companions took position ahead and to the sides, scanning the terrain with the vigilance of men who knew danger could come from anywhere. The one with green eyes rode closest, and several times she caught him glancing back toward the coach, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. They arrived in Victor as the sun began its descent behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold that took Josephine's breath away despite her exhaustion. The town was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of wooden buildings clustered along a main street thick with mud and horse droppings. Men in dusty clothes stood outside the saloons, watching the stagecoach pass with idle interest. Women in calico dresses hurried along the boardwalks, their faces weathered by wind and sun in a way that made Josephine suddenly conscious of her own pale, carefully protected complexion. The coach stopped in front of the general store, and Josephine recognized her uncle's balding head through the window. He burst through the door before she could even gather her belongings, his round face split by a wide smile. "Josie, my dear girl, you made it." Uncle Thomas swept her into a hug that smelled of tobacco and peppermint, and despite her fatigue, she hugged him back fiercely. He was her mother's brother, the one who had left Philadelphia 30 years ago to seek his fortune out west, and seeing him now, with his weathered hands and laugh lines, she realized how much he had changed from the daguerreotype she remembered. "The bridge was out," she explained as he helped her down. Some men escorted us the long way. That would be the Rawlings brothers, her uncle said, waving toward the 3 horsemen who had reined up nearby. Fine men, all of them. Isaiah, you boys want some coffee before you head back. The green-eyed man, Isaiah apparently, dismounted and walked toward them, removing his hat to reveal dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. Up close, Josephine could see he was perhaps 26 or 27, with the kind of rugged handsomeness that no Philadelphia gentleman could match. His shirt was faded from countless washings, his leather vest scarred and worn, and yet he carried himself with a quiet confidence that commanded respect. "Appreciate it, Thomas, but we need to get back to the ranch before dark," Isaiah said. His gaze shifted to Josephine. "Hope you found the journey tolerable, miss." "Josephine Kensington," she said, extending her hand before remembering that Western women probably did not do such things. But Isaiah took it without hesitation, his calloused palm warm against her gloved fingers. "Isaiah Rawlings," he said. "Welcome to Victor. Hope it treats you well. Do you live nearby?" The question came out before she could stop it, and she felt her cheeks warm. "About 5 miles north up in the foothills. We run cattle mostly, some horses." He released her hand and she found herself missing the contact. "Your uncle runs the best store between here and Denver. You will be in good hands." Uncle Thomas chuckled. "Flattery will not get you a discount on those supplies you ordered, Isaiah." "Worth a try," Isaiah said, and the corner of his mouth quirked up in what might have been a smile. He settled his hat back on his head, nodded to Josephine, and returned to his horse. She watched as he mounted, the movement economical and practiced, then rode off with his brothers, their figures gradually disappearing into the gathering dusk. "He seems nice," Josephine said carefully. "The Rawlings boys are good people," her uncle agreed, picking up her traveling case. "Their father died about 5 years back, left them the ranch. Isaiah, being the oldest, took over running things. Works harder than any 3 men I know. Now come inside. Your aunt has supper waiting, and you must be starving." The rooms above the general store were small but clean, with whitewashed walls and simple furniture that struck Josephine as almost Spartan after her family's Philadelphia townhouse. Her Aunt Martha was a thin woman with kind eyes and capable hands, who immediately set about making Josephine feel welcome, showing her to a small bedroom with a window overlooking the main street. "It is not fancy," Aunt Martha said apologetically, "but the mattress is good and you will have privacy." "It is perfect," Josephine assured her, meaning it. Through the window she could see the mountains rising in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the warmth of the day. Something about the vast openness of the landscape both terrified and thrilled her. In Philadelphia, buildings hemmed you in, society's rules and expectations creating invisible walls more confining than any structure. Here, the sky seemed to stretch forever. That night, lying in her narrow bed, she listened to unfamiliar sounds. The lowing of cattle from somewhere nearby, men's rough laughter from the saloon down the street, the wind whistling around the eaves. And she thought about green eyes and calloused hands, and wondered why a man she had known for barely an hour would not leave her thoughts. The next morning, Josephine woke to the sound of roosters and wagon wheels, the sun barely cresting the mountains. She dressed quickly in one of her simpler day dresses, though even that felt absurdly formal compared to what she had seen the local women wearing. When she came downstairs, she found her uncle already at work, arranging canned goods on the shelves while Aunt Martha swept the floor. "Good, you are up," Uncle Thomas said cheerfully. "Thought I would show you the inventory system today. It is not complicated, but it takes some getting used to." Josephine spent the morning learning where everything was kept, from dry goods to ammunition to the bolts of fabric, that the local women favored. The store carried everything from buttons to horse blankets, and she marveled at the sheer variety. Customers trickled in throughout the day, most of them eyeing her with curiosity but treating her politely. She met miners with blackened fingernails, ranchers with weathered faces, women who spoke in clipped, efficient sentences that got straight to the point. No one here had time for the lengthy social niceties she had grown up with. Around midday, the bell above the door chimed, and Josephine looked up from the ledger she had been studying to find Isaiah Rawlings standing in the doorway, hat in hand. Her heart did an unexpected little jump. "Afternoon," he said, nodding to her before addressing her uncle. "Thomas, I am here for those supplies I ordered, the barbed wire and the salt licks." Right, I have it all set aside in the back," Uncle Thomas said. "Josie, would you mind helping Isaiah load his wagon while I finish with Mrs. Henderson's order?" "Of course," Josephine said, smoothing her skirts and following Isaiah outside. His wagon waited in the alley behind the store, pulled by two sturdy horses that stamped and blew through their nostrils. Isaiah moved with purpose, lifting the heavy rolls of barbed wire as though they weighed nothing. Josephine grabbed one of the smaller blocks of salt, staggering slightly under its weight. "Careful," Isaiah said, taking it from her before she could protest. "These things are heavier than they look." "I can manage," she said, stung by the implication that she was too weak to help. He paused, studying her with those penetrating green eyes. "I am sure you can, but there is no shame in letting someone help when the work is hard." "In Philadelphia, women are not considered so fragile," she said, then immediately regretted the defensive tone. "I would not know about Philadelphia," Isaiah said mildly, returning to the store for another load. "But out here, everyone helps where they can. Man or woman does not matter. The work needs doing." She followed him back inside, determined to prove herself. This time when she reached for a salt block, he did not stop her, though she caught him watching out of the corner of his eye as she carried it outside and heaved it into the wagon bed with more force than grace. Her arms trembled from the effort, but she felt a small surge of satisfaction. They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds their footsteps and the creak of the wagon as they loaded it. Finally, Isaiah said, "What brings you out west, if you do not mind my asking?" "My uncle needed help with the store," Josephine said, "and I wanted a change from Philadelphia." "Must be quite a change," he said. "From what I hear, Philadelphia is all cobblestones and fancy buildings." "It is," she admitted, "but it can feel very small in its own way. Everyone knows everyone, and everyone has opinions about what you should do with your life." Isaiah lifted the last roll of barbed wire into the wagon. "Plenty of opinions out here too, just delivered differently." "Are you warning me off?" she asked, half joking. "No, madam," he said seriously. "Just saying that every place has its challenges. The frontier is not some magical cure for whatever ails a person, but it does have a way of showing you what you are made of." "And what am I made of?" The question came out more boldly than she intended. He looked at her then, really looked, his gaze traveling from her carefully pinned hair to her polished shoes, and she fought the urge to squirm under that assessment. "I reckon time will tell," he said finally. "But you carried those salt blocks when you did not have to. That is a start." Something in his tone made her flush with unexpected pleasure. She helped him secure the load with rope, and their hands brushed when they reached for the same knot. The contact sent a jolt through her, entirely inappropriate and entirely undeniable. "Thank you for your help, Miss Kensington," Isaiah said, pulling on his gloves. "Josephine," she corrected. "Please." "Josephine," he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his rough, edged voice. "I am sure I will see you around." He climbed into the wagon seat and drove off, and Josephine watched until he disappeared around the corner, her hands still tingling from where they had touched his. The days began to fall into a rhythm. Josephine woke early, helped her aunt prepare breakfast, then spent her mornings and afternoons in the store, learning the business from her uncle. She proved adept at numbers, catching several errors in the ledgers that Uncle Thomas had missed, and she had a good memory for faces and names, which helped with the customers. The townspeople gradually warmed to her, though she sensed they still saw her as an outsider, too refined and educated for their rough frontier town. Isaiah came by the store every week or so, always polite, always reserved. Sometimes they spoke only briefly, a few words about the weather or the store's inventory. Other times, if the store was quiet, they fell into longer conversations. He told her about ranch life, about the constant work of mending fences and tending cattle, about the harsh winters that could kill livestock if you were not prepared. She told him about Philadelphia, about the libraries and theaters and museums, though she found herself downplaying the glamour, not wanting him to think her spoiled. One October afternoon, Josephine was arranging a display of canned peaches when Isaiah entered, looking more agitated than she had ever seen him. "Thomas here," he asked without preamble, in the back. "Is something wrong? Lost 6 head of cattle last night," Isaiah said grimly. "Found tracks suggesting rustlers. I need ammunition and supplies for a few days on the trail." Uncle Thomas emerged from the storeroom, his expression grave. "Rustlers, you sure?" "Pretty sure," Isaiah said. "My brothers are rounding up some neighbors. We are heading out at first light to track them." Josephine felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "Is it dangerous?" Isaiah glanced at her, and for the first time she saw genuine worry in his eyes. "Can be, but we cannot let them get away with it. They will come back for more if we do." She helped gather the supplies he needed, moving quickly and efficiently despite the fear churning inside her. When everything was packed and ready, Isaiah paid, counted out the bills with steady hands, but she noticed the tension in his jaw, the way his gaze kept drifting toward the door as though already tracking invisible enemies. "Be careful," she said as he prepared to leave. He paused, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I will," he said quietly. "I promise." Then he was gone, and Josephine spent the next 3 days in a state of low-grade anxiety, jumping every time the door opened, hoping for news. When Isaiah finally returned, mud-splattered and exhausted but whole, she had to restrain herself from running to him. They had recovered 4 of the 6 cattle and driven the rustlers across the state line into Wyoming. And though Isaiah clearly considered it only a partial victory, everyone else seemed to think he and his companions had done well. "Thank God you are all right," Josephine said when he came by the store the next day. "It was not so bad," Isaiah said, though she noticed the fresh bruise on his jaw and the way he moved carefully, as though his ribs hurt. The rustlers were not interested in a real fight. "You are hurt," she said, stepping closer without thinking. "Just bruises," he assured her. "Had worse from getting thrown by a horse." She wanted to touch the bruise to smooth away the evidence of danger, but she kept her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I worried," she admitted. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes. "Did you?" "Of course I did," she said, exasperated. "You could have been killed." "But I was not," he said gently. "Josephine, this is the frontier. There are risks, cattle rustlers, harsh weather accidents. A person could drive themselves mad worrying about every danger." "I know that," she said. "Knowing does not make it easier." They stood there in the aisle between the dry goods and the hardware, the air thick with unspoken things. Finally, Isaiah said, "I should go. Just wanted to let your uncle know we got back safe." But he did not move, and neither did she, and Josephine realized with sudden clarity that something had changed between them. Some line had been crossed during those 3 days of worry and waiting. "Isaiah," she started, not even knowing what she wanted to say. He shook his head slightly. "I will see you soon," he said, and left before she could form a response. That evening, as Josephine helped her aunt prepare supper, Martha said casually, "Isaiah Rawlings is a good man." Josephine's hand stilled on the potatoes she was peeling. "I know. He lost his wife about 4 years ago," her aunt continued. "Died in childbirth, both her and the baby. Nearly destroyed him. He threw himself into work, keeping that ranch going through sheer stubbornness. A lot of women have tried to catch his eye since, but he has not shown interest in any of them." Josephine absorbed this information, her heart aching for the pain Isaiah must have endured. "Why are you telling me this?" Martha smiled gently. "Because I see the way you look at each other. And because you should know that if he is interested, it means something. He does not give his heart easily." "I do not even know if he is interested," Josephine protested weakly. "Oh, he is interested," Martha said with certainty. "The question is what you are going to do about it." Josephine thought about that question over the following weeks as autumn deepened into early winter. The mountains took on their snow caps, and the air turned crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and pine. Isaiah continued his regular visits to the store, and their conversations grew longer, more personal. He told her about his childhood, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about his father's stern but loving guidance. She told him about her parents' expectations, about the suffocating pressure to marry well and produce the right number of grandchildren at the right intervals. "Why did you really leave?" Isaiah asked one November afternoon. They were sitting on the bench outside the store during a rare, quiet moment, watching the townspeople go about their business. Josephine considered her answer carefully. "Because I was dying there," she said finally. "Not literally, but in every way that mattered. I would wake up each morning knowing exactly how the day would unfold, who I would see, what I would say. My mother had already picked out 3 suitable men for me to marry, and they were all perfectly nice and perfectly boring, and the thought of spending the rest of my life in that gilded cage made me want to scream." "So you came here," Isaiah said. "So I came here," she agreed. "And everyone thought I was mad. My mother cried for 3 days. My father threatened to cut off my inheritance. My friends acted like I was committing social suicide." "You regret it?" She turned to look at him, this man with his weathered face and calloused hands and eyes that saw too much. "No," she said truthfully. "Not for a moment." Isaiah held her gaze. "I am glad," he said quietly. The first real snow came in early December, a heavy storm that blanketed Victor in white and made the streets nearly impassable. Josephine stood at the store window, marveling at the transformation. In Philadelphia, snow was a nuisance, quickly turning to gray slush. Here it was beautiful, pristine, the mountains disappearing into white sky. "We probably will not see many customers today," Uncle Thomas said, coming to stand beside her. "People will stay home unless they absolutely need something." But mid-morning the door opened, letting in a blast of cold air, and Isaiah, snow-covered and breathing hard. "Need the doctor," he said urgently. "Is he in town?" "Dr. Morrison is out at the Peterson Ranch," Uncle Thomas said. "Their daughter is having her baby." "What is wrong?" "My brother Jacob got thrown by a horse, landed wrong. His leg is broken bad and he is bleeding more than he should be. I need to set it and get the bleeding stopped, but I cannot do it alone." "I will come," Josephine said immediately. Isaiah looked at her, clearly about to protest, but Uncle Thomas cut him off. "She has steady hands and a strong stomach. Josie, get the medical supplies from the back. Isaiah, hitch your wagon to the back. You are not riding 5 miles in this storm." They made the journey in tense silence, the snow falling so thickly that Josephine could barely see the horses' heads. Isaiah drove with grim concentration, his jaw tight with worry. When they finally reached the ranch house, a sturdy log structure nestled against the hillside, Josephine could hear someone crying out in pain before they even reached the door. Isaiah's younger brother, a lanky man in his early 20s, lay on a bed in the main room, his face gray with pain. His right leg was clearly broken, bent at an unnatural angle, and blood had soaked through his trouser leg. Another brother, maybe a year or two younger than Isaiah, knelt beside the bed, looking terrified. "Lucas, get water boiling," Isaiah ordered, already moving toward Jacob. "Josephine, I need you to help hold him while I set the leg." She did not hesitate, moving to Jacob's head and placing her hands on his shoulders. "This will hurt," she told him honestly, "but we will be as quick as we can." Isaiah cut away Jacob's trouser leg, revealing the break. Josephine had to swallow hard at the sight of the bone pressing against the skin, but she kept her expression calm. Isaiah worked with efficient precision, his hands steady despite the circumstances. When he pulled the leg straight, Jacob screamed, and Josephine had to use all her strength to keep him from thrashing. "Hold him," Isaiah commanded, and she bore down harder, murmuring soothing nonsense to Jacob while Isaiah finished setting the bone. They splinted it with boards and strips of cloth, then addressed the bleeding, which was coming from a deep gash in Jacob's thigh. Isaiah cleaned and stitched it with the same steady hands, and Josephine watched with growing respect for his competence. When it was finally done, Jacob had passed out from the pain, which was probably a mercy. Isaiah sagged back on his heels, exhaling shakily. "That was well done," Josephine said softly. "He will be lucky if infection does not set in," Isaiah said grimly. "We will need to watch him close for the next few days." "I can stay," she offered. "Help nurse him." Isaiah looked at her and she saw the exhaustion and worry etched in his face. "You do not have to do that." "I know," she said, "but I want to help." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, thank you." Josephine sent word to her aunt and uncle through Lucas, who rode back to town once the snow let up that evening. She spent the next 3 days at the Rawlings ranch, helping tend Jacob, who developed a fever that had them all terrified until it finally broke on the 3rd day. She learned to cook on the wood stove, to feed the chickens and gather eggs, to do a dozen small tasks that kept a ranch household running. Isaiah's brothers treated her with a mixture of gratitude and bemusement, clearly unused to having a woman in the house. But it was Isaiah she was most aware of. Isaiah who came to check on Jacob every few hours. Isaiah who taught her how to properly bank the fire at night. Isaiah who sat with her at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed, talking quietly about everything and nothing. On the 4th night, with Jacob finally out of danger and sleeping peacefully, Isaiah walked Josephine out onto the porch. The snow had stopped, and the stars were brilliant overhead, so bright and numerous that she gasped. "You cannot see them like this in the city," she said, tilting her head back. "No," Isaiah agreed, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "This is one of the things I love most about this place. No matter how hard things get, the stars remind me that there is still beauty in the world." "Isaiah," she said, turning to face him, "thank you for letting me help." "I should be thanking you," he said. "You did not have to stay. You saved Jacob's life as surely as I did." "We saved it together," she corrected. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face as though asking permission. When she did not pull away, he gently tucked a stray curl behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. The touch sent heat flooding through her despite the cold air. "Josephine," he said, his voice rough. "I am not a man who does things by half. When I care about something, I give it everything I have, and I find myself caring about you more than I should." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Why should not you?" "Because you are educated and cultured, and I am a rancher who barely finished school. Because you came from wealth and society, and I have calluses and mud under my fingernails. Because you deserve someone who can give you the life you are used to, not a hard scrabble existence on the frontier." "What if I do not want the life I am used to?" she asked, covering his hand with hers, pressing it more firmly against her cheek. "What if I want something real instead?" "This is real," he said seriously. "The hardship is real. The work is real. The dangers are real. There are no fancy balls or theater performances out here. Just long days and cold nights and the constant struggle to keep everything together." "I know that," she said. "Isaiah, do you think I came out here expecting it to be easy? I came because I wanted to live, truly live, instead of just existing in some predetermined pattern. And these past few months, learning the store, meeting the people here, helping with Jacob, even carrying those blessed salt blocks, all of it has made me feel more alive than I ever felt in 22 years in Philadelphia." He searched her face, and she could see the war happening behind his eyes, hope battling with doubt. "You might change your mind," he said. "When winter really sets in, when the work gets even harder." "Then I will change my mind," she said, "but I do not think I will. And I wish you would give me the chance to prove it." Isaiah pulled her closer, his free arm wrapping around her waist. "I am afraid," he admitted. "I lost someone I cared about. It nearly broke me. I do not know if I could survive that again." Josephine's throat tightened. "I cannot promise that nothing will ever happen to me," she said. "But I can promise that I am stronger than I look. And I can promise that whatever time we have, I want to spend it with you." He kissed her then, soft and careful at first, as though she might shatter. But when she rose on her toes and kissed him back with all the pent-up longing of the past months, his control slipped. The kiss deepened, his arms tightening around her, and Josephine felt something inside her unfurl, some part of herself she had kept locked away for fear it would be crushed by society's expectations. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaiah rested his forehead against hers. "I want to court you properly," he said. "Do this right." "I would like that," she whispered. He kissed her once more, soft and sweet, and Josephine thought that if this was what living really meant, the risk and the fear and the soaring joy all tangled together, then she wanted all of it, every complicated moment. The next morning, Lucas drove her back to town, and Josephine spent the entire journey trying not to grin like an idiot. When she arrived at the store, Aunt Martha took one look at her face and smiled knowingly. "I see things went well at the ranch," she said. Josephine blushed. "Jacob is recovering nicely." "I am sure he is," her aunt said, her eyes twinkling. "And Isaiah, also well," Josephine said, unable to keep the happiness from her voice. Her uncle emerged from the back, took in her expression, and grunted approvingly. "About time that boy found someone. You will be good for each other." Josephine threw herself into her work over the next weeks, but her thoughts kept drifting to Isaiah, to the ranch, to the kisses they had shared. He came to town twice a week now, always finding excuses to linger at the store, and they stole whatever moments they could together. He taught her to ride, sitting behind her on his horse and guiding her hands on the reins, his chest solid and warm against her back. She read to him from books she had brought from Philadelphia, sharing her favorite poems and stories while he mended tack or carved new fence posts. Christmas came, and the whole town gathered for a celebration at the church. Isaiah gave Josephine a pair of leather riding gloves, soft and well-made, and she gave him a warm woolen scarf she had knitted herself, the stitches not quite even but serviceable. They danced to fiddle music, Isaiah surprisingly graceful despite his size, and when he walked her home through the snowy streets, he kissed her good night on her uncle's doorstep, tender and lingering. "I am falling in love with you," he said against her lips. "I tried not to, but I am." "Good," she said, her heart so full it hurt, "because I am already in love with you." The winter deepened, bringing storms that sometimes lasted for days. Josephine learned to appreciate the beauty and the terror of the frontier in equal measure. She watched men come into the store with frostbitten fingers, heard stories of livestock freezing in the fields, saw the way everyone pulled together to help their neighbors survive. And through it all, Isaiah was a constant presence, steady and strong, teaching her not just to survive but to thrive. One February afternoon, when the sun broke through after a week of storms, Isaiah took her up into the foothills on horseback. They stopped at a high point that overlooked the valley, the ranch house visible in the distance, and he helped her dismount. "I wanted to show you something," he said, leading her to a flat area sheltered by pines. "This is where I come when I need to think, where I came after Sarah died." It was the first time he had spoken his late wife's name in Josephine's presence, and she stood quietly, letting him find his words. "I thought I would never feel this way again," Isaiah said, staring out at the view. "The grief was so big I could not see past it, and I told myself that was fine, that I would just work the ranch and look after my brothers and that would be enough." He turned to her, his green eyes intense. "But you changed everything. You came here with your fancy dresses and your books and your determination to prove you were not fragile, and you made me want things I thought I had given up on." Josephine took his hands, cold even through the gloves. "What do you want?" she asked. "A life with you," he said simply. "Marriage, children if we are blessed with them, growing old together on this land. I know it is asking a lot. Ranch life is not easy for anyone, but especially not for a woman used to comfort and culture. But I will work every day to make you happy, to give you as much as I can." "Isaiah Rawlings," she said, tears pricking her eyes, "are you asking me to marry you?" "Yes," he said. "I am. Will you?" "Yes," she said immediately, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." He swept her into his arms, spinning her around while she clung to him, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her with a fierce joy that made her dizzy, and Josephine thought that nothing in her entire privileged Philadelphia life had ever felt this right. They married in April of 1877, on a day when the wildflowers were just beginning to bloom across the foothills. The whole town came to the wedding, cramming into the little church until people had to stand outside and listen through the open doors. Josephine wore a simple dress of cream-colored silk that Aunt Martha had helped her make, with wildflowers woven into her hair. Isaiah wore his best suit, looking both uncomfortable and impossibly handsome, and when he saw her walking down the aisle, his expression made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. Uncle Thomas gave her away, pressing a kiss to her cheek and whispering, "Your mother would have my head for this, but I think you are making the right choice." Josephine squeezed his hand, grateful beyond words for his support. Then she was standing beside Isaiah, repeating vows that felt more sacred than any contract she might have signed in Philadelphia society. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Isaiah kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the congregation sighed audibly. The celebration afterward was loud and joyful, with music and dancing and more food than Josephine had seen in months. Isaiah's brothers toasted the couple repeatedly, each toast growing more elaborate and embarrassing. The townspeople gave them practical gifts, cookware, blankets, preserved foods to help stock the ranch pantry. Someone gave them a rooster and 2 hens, which made Isaiah laugh until tears ran down his face. As the sun began to set, they slipped away from the party, riding back to the ranch on Isaiah's horse with Josephine seated in front of him, his arms secure around her waist. The ranch house had been cleaned and prepared, wildflowers in jars on every surface courtesy of Lucas and Jacob, and someone had left a fire burning in the hearth. "Welcome home, Mrs. Rawlings," Isaiah said, lifting her down from the horse. "Mrs. Rawlings," Josephine repeated, savoring the sound of it. "I like that." He carried her over the threshold, a tradition he insisted on despite her laughing protests. The main room glowed with firelight, warm and welcoming, and through the window she could see the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. "Are you scared?" Isaiah asked softly, setting her on her feet but keeping his arms around her. "No," she said honestly. "Nervous maybe, but not scared." "Not with you." He kissed her, and this time there was no audience, no need to hold back. They moved to the bedroom he had prepared, and Josephine let herself fall into the sweetness and the passion, into the feeling of being wholly wanted and wholly safe. Isaiah was gentle and patient, teaching her the language of bodies as carefully as he had taught her to ride. And when they finally lay tangled together in the darkness, Josephine felt transformed, remade into someone braver and truer than she had ever been. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love you too," he said, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "Thank you for taking a chance on me." "Thank you for taking a chance on me," she countered, a stubborn Easterner who did not know the first thing about ranch life. He chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "You are learning. Give it time." And she did learn, throwing herself into ranch life with the same determination she had brought to everything else. She learned to cook hearty meals that would sustain men doing hard physical labor. She learned to tend the vegetable garden, to preserve food for winter, to mend clothes that took a brutal beating from the work. She learned to help with the horses, to assist with calving season, to handle a rifle well enough to protect the chicken coop from foxes. It was not easy. There were days when her hands were so chapped and sore she wanted to cry, days when the loneliness of the isolated ranch felt crushing, days when she wondered if she had been insane to give up her comfortable Philadelphia life. But then Isaiah would come in from the range, his face lighting up when he saw her, or she would watch the sun set over the mountains in a blaze of impossible color, or she would feel the simple satisfaction of bread rising properly in the oven, and she would remember why she had chosen this life. Summer brought its own challenges. The heat was intense, the work relentless. They were up before dawn and often worked until full dark, trying to make the most of the long days. Josephine learned to ride well enough to help drive cattle, spending hours in the saddle beside Isaiah and his brothers. Her skin tanned despite her best efforts to protect it, and her hands developed their own set of calluses. She was leaner, harder, unmistakably changed from the pale Philadelphia girl who had arrived less than a year ago. One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Isaiah said, "You have not complained once, not really." "About what?" Josephine asked, nestled against his side. "About any of this. The hard work, the isolation, the lack of luxuries. The women in town take bets on how long you will last before you run back east." Josephine stiffened. "Do they really?" "Some of them," Isaiah admitted. "Not everyone, but there is a general opinion that someone from your background cannot possibly be happy out here long term." "Then they do not know me very well," Josephine said firmly. "Isaiah, I will not pretend every moment is perfect. There are times I miss theaters and libraries and being able to buy a new dress when I want one. but I would not trade this life for anything. Not for all the culture and comfort Philadelphia has to offer. Why? He asked, turning to look at her. She thought about her answer, wanting to get it right. Because here I matter, not because of my family name or how much money my father has or who I might marry. I matter because of what I contribute, what I can do. When I help deliver a calf or bring lunch out to you and your brothers in the field or manage to shoot that fox that was killing our chickens, I have accomplished something real. And I am married to a man who sees me as a partner, not an ornament. That is worth more than any amount of luxury. Isaiah kissed her temple, his arm tightening around her. I never thought of you as an ornament. I know, she said. That is part of why I love you. Autumn brought the roundup, a massive undertaking that required all hands and several hired men besides. Josephine cooked for the crew, rising at 4 in the morning to have breakfast ready, packing lunches, preparing enormous dinners that disappeared in minutes. It was exhausting work, but she loved the camaraderie, the stories and laughter around the table, the sense of being part of something larger than herself. It was during the roundup that Josephine first suspected she might be pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses and felt queasy in the mornings, though she said nothing, waiting to be sure. When October arrived and her suspicions were confirmed, she waited for the right moment to tell Isaiah. It came one evening after the hired men had left, and it was just family again. They were sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing the ranch accounts when Josephine set down her pencil and said, "Isaiah, I have something to tell you." He looked up, immediately alert to the seriousness in her tone. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," she said quickly. "At least, I hope you will not think so. I am pregnant. The baby should come sometime in May." Isaiah stared at her, his expression cycling through surprise, joy, and fear so quickly she could barely track it. "Are you sure?" "Very sure," she said. "I know it is soon. We have only been married 6 months," but he was around the table before she could finish, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "Are you happy about it?" he asked, his voice tight. "Yes," she said, understanding the fear behind the question, the memory of the wife and child he had lost. "Isaiah, I am healthy and strong, and we will get Dr. Morrison as soon as my time comes. Everything will be all right." "I could not bear it," he said, his face buried in her hair. "If I lost you—" "You will not," she said fiercely. "I am not going anywhere." He held her for a long time, and she felt him shaking slightly, the fear he would not voice. She stroked his back, murmuring reassurances, until finally he pulled away enough to look at her. "A baby," he said, and now there was wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," she confirmed, smiling. He kissed her then, soft and reverent, and Josephine sent up a silent prayer that everything would indeed be all right, that she would not leave him shattered again. The winter was milder that year, or perhaps she was simply more prepared for it. Josephine slowed down as her pregnancy progressed, but she remained active, doing what work she could while Isaiah and his brothers took on the heavier tasks. The townswomen warmed to her considerably once word of the baby spread, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes, sharing their own stories of childbirth and child-rearing. Even the women who had bet against her staying seemed to soften, acknowledging that perhaps she was tougher than she looked. Isaiah was alternately doting and terrified. He fussed over her constantly, trying to prevent her from doing anything remotely strenuous, until she finally sat him down and made him listen. "I am pregnant, not dying," she said firmly. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, and most of us survive it just fine. You need to trust that I know my own limits." "I am trying," he said. "But every time I look at you, I remember Sarah, how she seemed fine right up until she was not." Josephine took his face in her hands. "I am not Sarah. I am sorry for what happened to her, more sorry than I can say. But I am different, and this baby is different, and you cannot spend the next 4 months living in fear of something that probably will not happen." "Probably," he said, latching onto the word. "Nothing in life is certain," she said. "You taught me that, but we cannot let fear stop us from living. If you had let fear win, you never would have asked to court me in the first place." He pulled her close, careful of her growing belly. "You are right," he said. "I am sorry. I will try to do better." And he did try, though she caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her heart ache. She took extra care to eat well and rest when she needed to, as much to reassure him as for her own health. The baby grew, her belly swelling, and she marveled at the strange beauty of it, the way her body changed to accommodate new life. Spring came early in 1878, the snow melting to reveal green grass and early flowers. Josephine spent hours planning the nursery, sewing tiny clothes and blankets, preparing for the baby's arrival. Isaiah built a beautiful cradle from pine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk, and Lucas carved small animals to hang above it. On a warm evening in early May, Josephine's water broke while she was preparing dinner. She felt the sudden gush and looked down at the puddle on the floor, then up at Isaiah, who had gone pale. "It is time," she said, trying to sound calm despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. Isaiah moved into action, sending Jacob racing into town for Dr. Morrison while he helped Josephine to the bedroom. Lucas hovered anxiously in the doorway until Isaiah snapped at him to boil water and gather clean linens. The contractions started soon after, mild at first but gradually intensifying. Dr. Morrison arrived within 2 hours, a calm, capable man in his 50s who examined Josephine and pronounced everything normal. "First babies can take a while," he said. "Could be tonight, could be tomorrow. Try to rest between contractions." Easy for him to say, Josephine thought as another contraction gripped her. Isaiah held her hand, letting her squeeze as hard as she needed, his face tight with worry. The hours blurred together, pain and rest cycling endlessly. Night fell, then dawn broke, and still the baby did not come. Josephine was exhausted, drenched in sweat, beginning to wonder if it would ever end. "You are doing fine," Dr. Morrison assured her. "The baby is positioned well. It is just taking its time." "Tell the baby to hurry up," Josephine gasped, and Isaiah laughed weakly. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith, Dr. Morrison said, "All right, Mrs. Rawlings, the next contraction, I need you to push." Josephine bore down with all her strength, feeling like she was being torn apart. Isaiah murmured encouragement, his face nearly as pale as hers. She pushed again and again until she thought she could not possibly continue, and then suddenly there was a release, and a baby's cry filled the room. "It is a boy," Dr. Morrison announced, holding up a red-faced, wailing infant. "A big, healthy boy." Josephine collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaming down her face. Isaiah was crying too, she realized, staring at his son with an expression of such overwhelming love and relief that it made her own tears flow harder. The doctor cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket, then placed him in Josephine's arms. "Hello," she whispered to the tiny, perfect face. "Hello, little one." The baby stopped crying, his unfocused eyes seeming to search for her. He was beautiful, with a shock of dark hair and Isaiah's strong features already visible even in his newborn face. Josephine touched his tiny hand, and his fingers wrapped around hers with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Isaiah said, his voice choked with emotion. "You did so well." "I am so proud of you. We did well," she corrected, looking up at him. "Both of us." Dr. Morrison finished his work and gave them instructions for caring for the baby, but Josephine barely heard him. She was too absorbed in studying her son, counting his fingers and toes, marveling at the miracle of him. When the doctor finally left, promising to check on them in a few days, Isaiah carefully climbed onto the bed beside her, and they sat together, both watching the baby sleep. "What should we name him?" Isaiah asked. They had discussed names but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at her son, Josephine said, "Thomas, after my uncle. He gave me a chance when my own parents wanted nothing to do with my choices. And Isaiah for his middle name after his father." "Thomas Isaiah Rawlings," Isaiah said, testing it out. "I like it. Welcome to the world, Thomas." The baby slept, oblivious to his parents' joy, and Josephine felt a completeness she had never known existed. This was her family, this man and this child, and the ranch that had become her home. Everything she had given up seemed insignificant compared to what she had gained. The first weeks with Thomas were challenging. The baby woke every few hours to nurse, leaving Josephine exhausted and Isaiah constantly hovering, trying to help but mostly just getting in the way. She learned to function on minimal sleep, to nurse while doing other tasks, to change diapers with one hand while stirring a pot with the other. Isaiah took over more of the household work, doing dishes and laundry in addition to his ranch duties, and his brothers stepped up to handle tasks he would normally have done. But despite the exhaustion, Josephine had never been happier. Watching Isaiah with Thomas melted her heart every time. He was so gentle with the baby, so obviously awestruck by this tiny person they had created. He sang to Thomas in a surprisingly good baritone, songs from his childhood, and the baby would quiet immediately, seeming to recognize his father's voice. Summer passed in a blur of ranch work and baby care. Thomas grew rapidly, becoming chubby and alert, his personality emerging. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, and everyone on the ranch doted on him. Jacob carved him toys, and Lucas taught him to grab at colorful ribbons, and Isaiah carried him around in a sling so he could work and watch his son simultaneously. One August evening, as they sat on the porch with Thomas asleep in Josephine's arms, Isaiah said, "I never thought I could be this happy again. After Sarah, I convinced myself that happiness was not something I deserved anymore." "Why would you think that?" Josephine asked, troubled. "Because I could not save her," Isaiah said quietly. "I was here when she went into labor. I rode for the doctor myself. But by the time we got back, she was too far gone. The baby was stuck, and she was bleeding, and all I could do was watch her die. I failed her." "Isaiah, no," Josephine said fiercely. "You did everything you could. Sometimes things go wrong, and it is not anyone's fault. You cannot carry that guilt." "I know that in my head," he said, "but my heart took longer to believe it. And then you came along, so full of life and determination, and you made me want to try again. I was terrified that I would lose you the same way, that history would repeat itself. But it did not," she said. "And Thomas and I are both healthy and strong. You did not fail anyone, Isaiah. You saved us by getting the doctor quickly, by taking good care of me throughout the pregnancy. You are a wonderful husband and an amazing father." He reached over and took her free hand, threading his fingers through hers. "You taught me what living really means," he said. "Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You reminded me that life is meant to be felt, experienced, even when it is scary. Every risk I took with you has been worth it 1,000 times over." Josephine leaned into him, careful not to disturb Thomas. "You taught me too," she said. "How to be brave, how to trust myself, how to find joy in simple things. You showed me that there is more to life than what society deems proper or appropriate. I never really lived until I came here, until I met you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set and the stars emerge, their son sleeping peacefully between them. Josephine thought about the woman she had been when she arrived in Victor, anxious and uncertain despite her determination. That woman seemed like a stranger now. She had been transformed by this place, by this man, by the challenges and triumphs of frontier life. Autumn brought the round up again, and Josephine managed the house and baby while Isaiah and his brothers worked long days on the range. She had helped this year, a young woman from town named Emma who was saving money to start her own seamstress business. Emma was cheerful and capable, and she and Josephine became friends as they worked together, talking about everything from recipes to babies to the frustrations of being women in a world that often did not take them seriously. "You are lucky," Emma said one day as they kneaded bread dough. "Isaiah treats you like a true partner." "I know," Josephine said. "Not all men do. Most men do not," Emma said bluntly. "My father thinks women should be seen and not heard. My brother barely acknowledges his wife unless he needs something. But Isaiah asks your opinion, values your work. That is rare." Josephine felt a surge of gratitude for her husband, for his respect and partnership. She had not realized how unusual it was until Emma pointed it out. That evening, when Isaiah came in from the range, dirty and exhausted, she threw her arms around him and kissed him soundly. "What was that for?" he asked, surprised but pleased. "For being you," she said. "For being someone who sees me as an equal." He smiled, the expression crinkling his eyes. "Always," he said. "We are in this together." Winter came again, and this time Josephine faced it with confidence. She knew what to expect, how to prepare, how to keep the household running even when the snow piled high and the temperature dropped below zero. Thomas had his first Christmas. Though at 8 months old, he was more interested in the wrapping paper than the wooden blocks Jacob had made for him. They went to the church celebration, and Josephine felt a warm glow of belonging as people greeted them, admired Thomas, treated them as part of the community rather than outsiders. "You have made a real home here," Uncle Thomas said, pulling her aside during the party. "I am proud of you, Josie." "Thank you for believing in me," she said, hugging him, "for giving me the chance to find this life." "You would have found your way eventually," he said. "You are too stubborn not to." She laughed, knowing it was true. That stubbornness had carried her through every challenge, every moment of doubt. She had needed it, would need it again in the future. Ranch life did not get easier with time, it just became familiar. The years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythm of ranch work. Thomas grew into a bright, active toddler who wanted to help with everything, following his father around and imitating his every move. Josephine became pregnant again in the spring of 1880, and this time the pregnancy felt easier, her body knowing what to expect. She gave birth to a daughter in December, a tiny, delicate girl they named Martha after her aunt, with Josephine's dark eyes and a temperament far more demanding than her brother's had been. Isaiah was just as besotted with Martha as he had been with Thomas, though Josephine teased him about being overprotective. "She is a girl," he protested. "I am supposed to be protective." "She is 3 months old," Josephine countered. "You have at least 18 years before you need to worry about boys." But she secretly loved his devotion to their children, the way he made time for them no matter how busy the ranch kept him. He taught Thomas to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, perching him on the gentlest horse and walking beside him for hours. He sang to Martha every night, the same songs he had sung to Thomas, and the baby would quiet immediately, her little face solemn as she listened. Life was not without its difficulties. There were droughts that killed grass and endangered the cattle, harsh winters that tested everyone's endurance, illnesses that swept through the valley. They lost animals to disease and predators, faced financial pressures when beef prices dropped, dealt with broken equipment and damaged buildings. But they faced everything together, Isaiah and Josephine and his brothers, working as a team. In the summer of 1882, when Thomas was 4 and Martha a toddler, Uncle Thomas became seriously ill. Josephine spent weeks going back and forth between the ranch and town, helping Aunt Martha care for him. Isaiah took over more of the household duties without complaint, managing the children and the cooking in addition to the ranch work. Uncle Thomas rallied briefly in August, long enough to tell Josephine how proud he was of the woman she had become, and then he slipped away peacefully one morning, Aunt Martha holding one hand and Josephine the other. The funeral was large, the entire town turning out to honor a man who had been a pillar of the community. Josephine spoke through her tears, talking about her uncle's kindness and generosity, how he had given her the chance to build a new life. Afterward, Isaiah held her while she cried, letting her grieve without trying to fix it. "He was a good man," Isaiah said. "He saw your potential when others did not." "I wish he could have seen the children grow up," Josephine said. "I wish he could have known how happy I am." "He knew," Isaiah assured her. "Every time he looked at you, he knew." Aunt Martha decided to sell the store and move to Denver to live with her sister, and Josephine helped her pack up the building where she had spent her first months in Victor. It felt like closing a chapter, saying goodbye to that uncertain girl who had arrived on the stagecoach 6 years earlier. But new chapters were opening all the time. Thomas started school that fall, walking to town with the neighbors' children, and Martha was talking in full sentences, her personality emerging strong and opinionated. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Isaiah expanded their herd, bought more land, improved the facilities. Lucas got married and moved to a house they built on the eastern section of the property, while Jacob took over more of the day-to-day management, proving to have a real talent for breeding and training horses. They hired additional help during busy seasons, and the Rawlings name became synonymous with quality cattle and honest dealing. On a warm evening in May of 1883, exactly 6 years after their wedding, Isaiah took Josephine back up to that high point in the foothills where he had proposed. They left the children with Lucas and his wife, taking the evening for themselves, something they rarely had time for anymore. "You remember when I brought you here?" Isaiah asked as they stood looking out over the valley, the ranch house small in the distance. "Of course," Josephine said. "You told me you wanted a life with me. You were so serious, so worried I would say no." "I was terrified," Isaiah admitted. "I had convinced myself that you would realize you could do better, that you would come to your senses and leave. And instead I stayed," she said. "And I would stay again, 1,000 times over. This life we built together, it is everything I never knew I wanted." Isaiah turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You changed me," he said. "You taught me that it is possible to heal, to risk loving again, to build something new from grief. Every day with you has been a gift." "You taught me what living really means," Josephine said, echoing his words from that August evening years ago. "Before you, I was just playing a role, being what everyone expected. You showed me how to be myself, how to find strength I did not know I had. You taught me that a real partnership is worth more than any amount of wealth or status." He kissed her as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and Josephine felt the same flutter of joy and desire she had felt the first time their lips met. Some things never changed, even as everything else did. They made love there on the hillside, with only the stars and the wind for witnesses, and Josephine thought about how scandalous her Philadelphia friends would find this, how utterly improper. But she did not care. This was her life, her choice, her love, and it was more real than anything she had left behind. The years continued to roll by. each one bringing new joys and challenges. Josephine gave birth to 2 more children, another boy and then another girl spaced 2 years apart. The ranch house expanded to accommodate their growing family, rooms added on as needed. Thomas grew tall and strong like his father, already showing an aptitude for ranch work that made Isaiah beam with pride. Martha was clever and determined, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. The younger children were still finding themselves, but they were healthy and happy, and that was what mattered. Josephine's parents never reconciled themselves to her choices. They wrote occasionally, stiff formal letters that asked about her health and the children, but never quite acknowledged that she had made the right decision. Josephine wrote back dutifully, sending photographs when they could get to a studio in Denver, but she no longer hoped for their approval. She had found her own family, her own place, and that was enough. In 1887, Victor began to boom. Gold was discovered in the hills, and suddenly the sleepy frontier town transformed into something bustling and chaotic. New people poured in, businesses opened, the population swelled. The Rawlings ranch prospered from selling beef to the miners, and Isaiah invested carefully, buying more land before prices skyrocketed. They were never rich by Philadelphia standards, but they were comfortable, secure in a way that went beyond money. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Isaiah asked one evening as they watched their children play in the yard. Thomas was teaching the younger ones to rope fence posts, patient and instructive. "No," Josephine admitted. "When I got on that stagecoach in Philadelphia, I had no idea what I was heading toward. I just knew I could not stay where I was." "I am glad you were brave enough to leave," Isaiah said, slipping his arm around her waist. "Glad you were stubborn enough to stay when things got hard. Glad you took a chance on a rough cowboy who barely knew what to do with a woman like you." "You knew exactly what to do," Josephine said, leaning into him. "You let me find my own way, but you were always there to catch me if I fell. That is all I ever needed." They stood together watching their children, the ranch they had built, the mountains standing eternal in the distance. Josephine thought about that girl on the stagecoach, scared and determined and hopeful. She wished she could tell that girl that everything would work out better than she could possibly imagine, that the risks would be worth it, that she would find not just a new place to live but a true home. In the spring of 1891, Thomas turned 13 and announced he wanted to work the ranch full-time instead of continuing school. Josephine and Isaiah discussed it long into the night, weighing his obvious passion for ranching against the value of education. "I do not want him to limit his options," Josephine said. "What if he changes his mind later?" "Then we will deal with it then," Isaiah said, "but I do not think he will. He has ranch work in his blood. He loves this life the way we do." "I know," Josephine sighed. "I just want him to have every opportunity." "He will," Isaiah assured her. "Maybe not the same opportunities you had, but good ones nonetheless. And we can make sure he keeps reading, keeps learning, even if he is not in a classroom." They agreed to let Thomas work the ranch, and he threw himself into it with the same dedication his father showed. He was good with the cattle, patient with the horses, and the other ranch hands respected him despite his youth. Watching him, Josephine saw flashes of Isaiah at that age, the same quiet competence, the same deep connection to the land. Martha, on the other hand, was determined to become a teacher. She devoured every book she could get her hands on, practiced her letters obsessively, helped teach her younger siblings their lessons. When she announced at 11 that she planned to go to normal school and get her teaching certificate, Josephine supported her wholeheartedly, even knowing it might mean Martha would leave the ranch someday. "She has her own path," Isaiah said when Josephine fretted about it. "Just like you did." We will support her wherever it leads." "When did you become so wise?" Josephine asked, only half teasing. "I married a woman who taught me to see beyond my own limited perspective," Isaiah said. "Seemed smart to listen to her." In the late summer of 1892, Isaiah's brother Lucas died in a riding accident, thrown from his horse and breaking his neck. The loss devastated the family. Lucas left behind a widow and 2 young children, and Isaiah insisted they all move into the main ranch house, unwilling to let them struggle alone. The house became even more crowded, but no one complained. They were family, and family took care of each other. Josephine watched Isaiah grieve his brother, saw the way he threw himself into caring for Lucas's children as though they were his own. She understood now, in a way she had not when they first married, how deeply his losses had marked him. He loved fiercely because he knew how easily love could be taken away. He worked tirelessly because he knew how fragile security really was. And he held his family close because he understood that today's embrace might be the last one. "I am sorry," she whispered to him one night when he finally broke down and cried for his brother. "I am so sorry." "At least I got to say goodbye," Isaiah said through his tears. "At least I told him I loved him before it happened. That is more than I had with Sarah." She held him while he wept, giving him the same gift he had given her so many times, the space to grieve without judgment, without needing to be strong. Love meant bearing witness to pain, not just sharing joy. The gold boom began to fade in the mid-1890s, and Victor slowly transformed again, some people leaving as the easy pickings ran out, others staying to work the deeper veins that required more investment and effort. The town settled into something more stable, less frantic, and Josephine found she preferred it this way. The Rawlings ranch continued to thrive, diversifying into crops and dairy in addition to cattle, adapting to changing markets and needs. In 1897, Martha left for normal school in Colorado Springs, and Josephine cried even though she was proud. Her daughter was 18, confident and capable, ready to make her own mark on the world. Isaiah held Josephine's hand as they watched the stagecoach carry Martha away, both of them remembering another stagecoach, another young woman setting out on her own journey. "She will be fine," Isaiah said. "She has your courage." "And your determination," Josephine added. "Then she cannot fail," Isaiah said, and pulled her close. Thomas married in 1898, wedding his childhood sweetheart in the same church where Isaiah and Josephine had married 21 years earlier. The young couple moved into the house Lucas had built, taking over management of that section of the ranch. Josephine watched her son build his own life with the same care and dedication his father had shown, and she felt the satisfaction of seeing the ranch continue into the next generation. The new century arrived with grand celebrations, everyone marveling at the modern age they lived in now. Automobiles began appearing in Denver, though they were still rare curiosities. Telephones connected the major cities. The frontier was tamed, or so everyone said, though Josephine knew the land itself remained as wild and unforgiving as ever. In the spring of 1902, Martha returned home, bringing with her a young man she introduced as her fiancé. He was a teacher like her, earnest and educated, and while Isaiah grumbled about city fellows who did not know one end of a horse from another, Josephine could see he approved. They married that summer, and Martha moved to Cripple Creek where they both taught at the new school. "All the children grown and gone," Josephine said wonderingly as she and Isaiah sat on the porch one evening, their nest suddenly empty except for Jacob, who still lived in the bunkhouse and showed no signs of marrying. "Not gone far," Isaiah said. Thomas is just over the hill and Martha is only an hour away by wagon. We will see them plenty." "I know," Josephine said. "It just feels strange. For so long my days revolved around caring for them." "Now your days can revolve around something else," Isaiah said. "Maybe that book you always talked about writing." Josephine laughed. "I am not sure anyone wants to read about an Easterner bumbling her way through ranch life." "I would rate it," Isaiah said seriously. "Your story is worth telling. How you came here not knowing anything, how you learned and adapted and thrived. How you taught yourself to shoot and ride and deliver calves. How you built this life through sheer determination." "Our story," Josephine corrected. "I could not have done any of it without you." "And I could not have done any of it without you," Isaiah said. "We built this life together from nothing. That is something to be proud of." She took his hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of decades of practice. His hair was gray now, his face deeply lined by sun and wind. Her own reflection showed silver in her hair, weathered skin, the marks of a hard life lived outdoors. They were not the young couple who had married under the springtime sky, and yet in all the ways that mattered, they were exactly the same. "You ever regret it?" Isaiah asked, a question he had asked many times over the years. "Giving up your comfortable life for this?" "Never," Josephine said, meaning it with her whole heart. "Not once, not even on the hardest days. You taught me what living really means, Isaiah. You showed me that a life built on love and partnership and shared purpose is worth more than any amount of luxury or ease. I would choose you and this ranch and this life 1,000 times over." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Josephine tasted in that kiss all the years behind them and all the years still to come. They had built something that would last, something that would continue through their children and grandchildren, a legacy of hard work and honest dealing and love that endured despite everything life threw at it. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in the familiar colors of crimson and gold, Josephine thought about that stagecoach ride 26 years ago, about the frightened but determined girl she had been. That girl had been looking for escape, but she had found so much more. She had found purpose and partnership, challenge and triumph, a love that had tested her and changed her and made her into someone stronger and braver than she ever imagined she could be. And she had found Isaiah, the rough cowboy who had seen past her fancy dresses and Philadelphia manners to the woman beneath, who had believed in her when she barely believed in herself, who had taught her that living meant taking risks and facing fears and choosing love even when it scared you. They sat together as the stars emerged, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their wedding, the birth of their children, every triumph and tragedy of their shared life. The ranch was quiet around them, the cattle settling for the night, the horses dozing in the barn. Peace settled over Josephine, deep and abiding. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Isaiah asked. "For everything," she said. "For taking a chance on me, for being patient while I learned, for building this life with me, for loving me through all of it." "Thank you," Isaiah echoed. "For being brave enough to stay, for teaching me to love again, for giving me a family and a home and a reason to wake up grateful every morning. You saved me, Josephine. I was lost before you came, and you showed me the way back to living." "We saved each other," she said, and knew it was true. They sat there until the stars filled the sky, holding hands, sharing comfortable silence. Two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. The frontier had shaped them, challenged them, forged them into stronger versions of themselves. But it was love that had sustained them, the choice they made every day to build something together, to face whatever came as partners. Inside the house, the clock struck 9, and Isaiah stirred. "We should get some sleep. Early day tomorrow." "There is always an early day tomorrow," Josephine said, but she stood, accepting his hand as he pulled her to her feet. They walked inside together, Isaiah's arm around her waist, Josephine's head resting on his shoulder. The house was dark and quiet without the children, but it did not feel empty. It felt peaceful, like a job well done, a chapter completed. There would be grandchildren soon enough, new voices filling the rooms, new laughter echoing through the halls. But for now, it was just the two of them, the way it had started, the way it would end. In bed, Isaiah pulled her close, and Josephine listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong. She thought about all the nights they had lain like this, exhausted from work, worried about money or weather or sick children, but always together, always finding comfort in each other's presence. That was the real gift of marriage, she had learned. Not the grand gestures or passionate declarations, but the steady, daily choice to keep building, keep trying, keep loving even when it was difficult. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Isaiah murmured, already half asleep. "Always have, always will." Josephine closed her eyes, a smile on her face. The frontier had given her so much: strength and purpose, community and belonging. But its greatest gift had been Isaiah, the cowboy who had taught her what it meant to truly live, to embrace every moment, every challenge, every joy with open arms and an open heart. She had come west looking for escape and found instead a home. She had been running from a life that felt too small and found one that stretched wider than she ever imagined. And she had met a man who saw her not as she was supposed to be, but as she truly was, and loved her for it. That was worth everything she had given up and more. That was worth every hardship and every struggle. That was worth the risk of loving, of opening your heart knowing it could be broken, of building a life with someone and trusting they would stand beside you no matter what came. As sleep claimed her, Josephine's last conscious thought was gratitude. For the stagecoach that had brought her to Victor, for the creek that had washed out the bridge, forcing her to take the northern route where she met Isaiah, for the courage to stay when things got hard, for the love that had grown between two unlikely people and created something beautiful and lasting. The years continued to pass, gentle and full. Thomas and his wife gave them grandchildren, 3 sturdy boys who visited the ranch often and learned to ride almost before they could walk. Martha had 2 daughters who were bright and curious, asking endless questions about everything they saw. Isaiah delighted in spoiling his grandchildren, teaching them the same skills he had taught his children, passing on the knowledge that his father had given him. Josephine wrote her book after all, spending her mornings at the kitchen table with pen and paper, documenting her journey from Philadelphia to the frontier. She sent the manuscript to a publisher in New York more out of curiosity than any real hope, and was shocked when they accepted it. The book was published in 1905, modestly successful, and Josephine received letters from women across the country thanking her for showing that it was possible to build a new life, to reinvent yourself, to find courage you did not know you possessed. "You are an author now," Isaiah teased, though his pride was evident. "I am a rancher who wrote a book," Josephine corrected. "There is a difference." "Not much of one," he said and kissed her forehead. In 1908, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a party that drew people from all over the valley. Their children and grandchildren were there, along with neighbors and friends and ranch hands past and present. People gave speeches about the Rawlings family, about their contributions to the community, about the example they set of what a true partnership looked like. Isaiah stood to respond, pulling Josephine up beside him. "I am not much for speeches," he said, which made everyone laugh because it was true. "But I want to say that everything good in my life comes from this woman. She took a chance on a rough rancher who did not deserve her, and she has spent 30 years making me better than I had any right to be. She taught me what living really means, and for that, I will be grateful every day of my life." Josephine's eyes filled with tears. "You taught me too," she said. "You showed me that real strength comes from facing your fears, that real love means building something together day by day, that real life happens out here in the work, and the struggle and the beauty of this wild place. I would not trade a single moment of these 30 years, not even the hard ones. They all brought us here." They kissed while everyone applauded, and Josephine felt the same flutter in her stomach she had felt the first time their lips met. Some things never faded, never diminished. Some things only grew stronger with time. As the party continued around them, Josephine looked at the life they had built. The ranch house expanded and improved over the years. The land itself, marked now with fences and buildings, and the evidence of 3 decades of careful stewardship. The children grown and building their own lives. The grandchildren running and playing with the same wild energy their parents had once shown. And Isaiah beside her, gray and weathered but still strong, still steady, still the man who had captured her heart with his quiet competence and gentle wisdom. This was what living meant. Not the grand adventures or dramatic moments, though there had been plenty of those, but the accumulation of days, each one built on the last, each one adding another thread to the tapestry of a shared life. The morning coffee drunk together while watching the sunrise. The work done side by side in companionable silence. The children raised with love and laughter. The challenges faced and overcome. The losses mourned and the joys celebrated. All of it, every moment, creating something larger and more beautiful than either of them could have achieved alone. The frontier had given them the space to become who they were meant to be. The ranch had given them purpose and pride. But it was love that had made it all worthwhile, the choice they made every single day to keep building, keep trying, keep loving each other with everything they had. As the sun set on their 30th anniversary, painting the mountains in shades of crimson and gold, Josephine leaned against Isaiah and smiled. She had found what she was looking for all those years ago, even though she had not known what it was at the time. She had found a place where she mattered, a man who saw her truly, a life that tested her and shaped her and made her into someone she was proud to be. "Happy?" Isaiah asked, his arm secure around her waist. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Josephine said truthfully. "You taught me what living really means, and I have spent 30 years living more fully than most people do in a lifetime." "We have more years ahead of us yet," Isaiah said. "More living to do." "Then let us make them count," Josephine said. "Every single day." They stood together watching the stars emerge, surrounded by the life they had built, the family they had created, the love that had sustained them through everything. The frontier was mostly tamed now, the wild places largely settled, but the spirit that had brought them together remained. The courage to take risks, to build something from nothing, to choose love even when it was scary, to face each new day with determination and hope. Josephine thought about the girl on the stagecoach one last time, so frightened and hopeful and desperate for change. She wished she could reach back through time and tell that girl that everything would work out better than she could imagine, that the risks would be worth it, that she would find not just a new place but a true home, not just a husband but a true partner, not just a life but a life worth living. But that girl would have to find out for herself, just as Josephine had. That was part of the journey, the discovery, the becoming. You could not tell someone how to live. They had to learn it themselves, through trial and error, through courage and perseverance, through the daily choice to keep trying, keep building, keep loving no matter what obstacles arose. Isaiah squeezed her hand, and Josephine squeezed back, a silent conversation that needed no words. They had said everything that needed saying over 30 years of marriage. Now they just needed to keep living, to keep building, to keep loving each other through whatever years remained. And as the stars filled the sky above the Colorado frontier, Josephine Rawlings knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice all those years ago. The choice to leave Philadelphia, to embrace the unknown, to take a chance on a rough cowboy with green eyes and a wounded heart. That choice had led her to this moment, this life, this love, and she would be grateful for it until her last breath. The frontier had shaped her, challenged her, tested her in ways she never expected. But it was Isaiah who had transformed her, who had shown her what it meant to truly live, to build a life based on love and partnership and shared purpose. Together they had created something beautiful and lasting, something that would continue through their children and grandchildren, a legacy of courage and determination, and love that endured. That was what living really meant. Not just existing, not just going through the motions, but fully embracing every moment, every challenge, every joy. Building something that mattered. Loving someone with your whole heart. Taking risks and facing fears and choosing hope even when the path ahead was uncertain. Isaiah had taught her that. And she had spent 30 years proving she was worthy of the lesson, worthy of the love, worthy of the life they had built together on the wild Colorado frontier. As they finally turned to go inside, ready to rest before another early morning, Josephine took one last look at the mountains silhouetted against the star-filled sky. This was her home. This was her life. This was where she belonged. And she had never been happier or more grateful for a single impulsive decision to board a stagecoach heading west, chasing something she could not name but found anyway in the arms of a cowboy who taught her what living really means.